guys, what's up? Hello, Dibs. How you doing? I know I have a lot of YouTube videos to make, and I've been watching some other blind people's videos on YouTube, and it's taken me a little bit to process this, but I had some airport problems in Louisiana, and I just want to talk about them. I don't know where to complain to the airport people, so I never did. Even though my trip was last month. And I still want to, but I don't know. I don't think it was Americans' fault. I think it was the airport's fault. And I don't know how you complain to an actual airport. I've never done that before. I've never had trouble like that. But I haven't traveled a lot on my own. So what happened was, okay, so we go to Omaha, Epley, which is where I go. So I go to Epley, and I get to, I get there, and my dad comes, walks me in, and we go to the counter, and they give him a gate pass so he can, walk me through security and sit with me and get food and wait for the plane. And, so we get there, and the lady, I go through the thing, and then, Salcha goes through, and then it beeps. And she's like, oh, come back out, come back out, come back out. And then she's like, he's beeping because of the harness. Can you take it off? So I'm like, okay. So I take off the harness. Well, he still beeps. So she's like, can you take off the collar and the leash? And I'm like, okay, but I don't know how to control him, and I don't know if he's going to run, because he's my new dog. I've only had him for, a month and a half. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. And so my dad's like, okay, so we take off everything, the leash, the collar, everything. So he's just like a dog. So, if he ran, I'm effed, because I have no way to catch him. He doesn't have a collar. So I'm like, okay, this is effed. So I told him to stay, and he actually did stay. Then he went through the security thing, and he did fine. And then my dad was on the other side because he'd already gone through. So he was able to get Salcha and have him stay and put the leash and the collar back on. And then I was able to go through, and then we could put the harness back on. And I was really annoyed because I was like, what the yeah. Because the thing is it says in the service animal DOT transportation forms and all the agreements, you must have your service dog under control at all times. If you cannot control your dog can be asked to remove. Well, I can't control my dog because he doesn't have anything on for me to hold him or grab him or whatever. He's run free. I got lucky, and Salcha was really well trained. Pop would have ran. I guarantee you Pop would have been gone. Sorry, guys, but yep. Chrome, I think Chrome might have stayed, actually. I do. But I was so nervous, and I took it off, and I couldn't hold him while he went through the security, so I was, scared to death, because I'm on the other side, and he has to go through, and I'm thinking, gosh, what if he runs through and then runs? But he ran through, and then I yelled, stay, and then my dad called him over, and somehow he got him to stay by him, and then I went through the thing. But I was so mad, because I've never, ever, ever had to do that, and I haven't flown by myself a lot, but I have flown before, and I've never in my life, never. Usually they'll just pat the dog down or something. Never have I had to do that. And I told the lady, I said, I am nervous about this because I want to make you aware that if I do this and I take all of it off, I can't control my dog, and I don't know what he's going to do. And she's like, okay. So, I made her aware, but I was frustrated because if the airport would have came back and said, oh, you couldn't control your dog, and what if they wouldn't let me fly because he ran? Thank God he didn't, and service dogs aren't supposed to run, but I've only had him for 2 months. Not even 2 months. I don't know. I don't know that much about this dog. yes, I know he's trained, and he is well trained, but I've never had him completely off leash, collar, harness, just run free, little one, except for like outside in the backyard. And that was when it was fenced in and open. This is like an area where there's tons of people and there's sounds and smells and God knows what. So I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I was terrified, like terrified, terrified. And so, we get through there and everything's good. And we sit down and I get food. I think I got a pack of chocolate donuts and a soda. My dad was awesome because I just sat there with Selcha and he went and got me food. And so he came back like forever later, and I guess it took a while. And he said the lines were long and then there was like, it wasn't close or whatever. So he finally comes back and I eat my food and we wait, and then they pre-board us. So from here on, I didn't have any problems. So they pre-board us and everything's good, and they didn't give me bulkhead seating. I called and they said, oh, we assigned you bulkhead seating. Well, they told me what seats I was going to be in, but it never changed and it didn't go through. So then they had to try to find me bulkhead seating in a crowded plane. So I'm like, this is great. This happened all the way through my trip. I didn't have bulkhead seating on the way there or back. They had to keep moving people to make me fit in a seat because I didn't have the seat with the extra room. And so they found me a seat and I got on and everything went good. And I got to DFW and I told them that I would need some assistance. And two guys came, super nice guys, and they walked with me through the airport. And we walked all the way from this airport's huge. They told me it was like one of the top 5 biggest airports in the world. And so we get off at gate C. We have to go all the way to A29 to get to the service animal relief area because Salcha's going to have to potty. So they're walking really fast, and I'm just following behind them with Salcha. And I want to tell them to slow down, but I don't want to be rude, so I'm just out of breath, keeping up like I do with my dad, because he doesn't slow down. If I ask him, sometimes he will, but I didn't want to, I don't know. So I walked with them, and Salcha, followed them perfectly, and we walked all over this airport. We went from C to A29, and then we went from A29 all the way to E something, and we took, 7 elevators and 3 trams, whatever those things are called that go to the different gates, and he was just perfect. I didn't have to hold their arm at all. I did have to give him possibly a few corrections, follow, keep following, leave it, a little bit here and there, but he walked me all around this airport, and I was so proud of him, and he was a trooper, and we walked a heck of a lot. I've never walked that much in an airport in my life. This airport's bigger than McCarran, and I thought McCarran was big, and I thought LAX was big because people tell me about LAX, but apparently this is bigger. And so we went everywhere, and he just followed and guided me around stuff and guided me into the train. And when we got on the train, he laid down and he stayed there the whole time. We got in the elevator and he laid down. Sometimes he'd lay down without me even telling him. The second time we went on the train, he laid down by himself before I could tell him to lay down because he knew that's what he was going to have to do. And so this dog is interesting because Pop and Chrome, you had to tell them, but sometimes if he knows what I'm doing, he'll automatically lay down. When I go to sit in my work chair, he'll automatically lay down because he knows that that's my work chair and that's what he's supposed to do. So I don't even have to tell him to lay down before I can say anything, he's down. So he just guided me flawlessly. I was so proud. I called my guide dog instructor and I was freaking out. I was almost crying. I was freaking out because I was this is amazing and I can't believe he guided me through this huge airport all by myself. And I didn't have anybody, and it was crazy, and I walked all this way, and I took all these trams and elevators, and I've only had him for 2 months, and I was so proud. I'm I don't know him that very well. He doesn't know me that well. I've only had him, when I went there, I'd only had him for a month, and so I was so proud, and I couldn't believe it. So then the problem started. So, I was I got food, and then I was sitting there. Well, at DFW, apparently they don't pre-board, and they don't announce it. So I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and all of a sudden they call Group 1, and I'm like, oh, shoot. They're not pre-boarding. Like, this isn't good. And so they call 1, and I make my way to the counter, and I'm like, excuse me, like, I'm supposed to be, like, pre-boarded, whatever. And they're like, oh, okay. And so they get me into the plane, and they have to find a seat for me. So they do all that, and then I'm fine. I get to Monroe, and somebody comes to help me, and I find my friend. So on the way back is where I had the most problems. This was insane. So we got to Monroe. We got checked in. They were really nice. They didn't make me take my shoes off. Omaha didn't make me take my shoes off because I have braces and I'm blind. They were super cool about it. And I got through security just fine. Somebody helped me, and my friend helped me to the security and checked my bag and everything, so we were good. So I flew from Monroe back to DFW, and I was fine. And then we got to DFW, and there was another blind person on the plane, too. And there were some unaccompanied minors on the plane. Well, the minors needed assistance, and so they came and helped the minors, like, right away. So then one of the guys that helped me last time came, and I'd forgotten to tip the guy, so I gave him $5. And I said, thank you for helping me last time. And then he brought us out, and he set both of us on a bench, and then we had to wait for someone else. So then this guy comes, and this girl comes, and this other guy comes, and they give the blind guy to this girl, and they walk off and go. And I'm like, okay. Well, Salcha's gonna have to pee because it's been, like, frickin' forever. Salch, no, thank you. So it's been, like, forever. And I know he's going to have to pee. Like last time, we need to rush to the relief thing. So we are standing there, and this guy is like, I don't even remember his name. I don't know. He was foreign, and I don't know his name. I forgot. It was something strange. But which I have no prejudice, because the guy that helped me last time that I gave the $5 to, he was foreign. I think his name was Ahmed or something. And he was the nicest guy. Like, he was amazing. Like, the sweetest gentleman. Like, he was just, like, amazing. Like, he was the coolest dude. And so anyway, I guess the other guy was the director or the boss or something. And so he said she needs to go to the pet relief area and then go to her gate. And he said, I not have time to take her to pet relief. And he said, yeah, that's what we're here for. And he's like, I need to do this. I need to get flight something. I guess he was supposed to do something with another flight. And he said, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. Just take her. And he's like, I don't have time. I take her to gate, no pet relief. And so he's arguing with this guy, and we're just standing there. And I'm like, can you please just get someone else to help me? Because he doesn't want to do it. And I don't want to be around people that don't want to help me. This is ridiculous. And he's like, no, he's going to do it. Well, then he kept arguing with the guy. So finally, he's like, okay, just go. Get out of here. And the guy's standing there, and he's like, what's your name? So he gets his name and all this stuff. I'm pretty sure he was in trouble. And he's like, man, I don't understand. This is our job to help people, and I don't understand what your problem is. So he gets his name, and he writes, I think he wrote it down. And I don't know. So he gets his name, and it was like, okay. And so he said, go. Well, then the guy just stood there, and he's like, go, get out of here. Go to gate E. Go now, leave. And so the guy finally leaves. And then I thought the director was going to take me, but he was like, hold on a second. And then this other guy came to take me. So I'm like, okay. And so they were like, we're going to get you a wheelchair because it's easier. And I'm like, well, if you think it's easier, we can try the wheelchair. So then I get in the wheelchair, and I have Salcha on my side. Salcha no likey. I mean, he flipped out. He kept trying to move away from the wheelchair, wouldn't walk, was walking all weird, didn't like the wheelchair. I think he thought that he was going to get hit if he walked by my side. So he, like, wouldn't walk. I couldn't control him. I couldn't command him. He wouldn't walk. He was, like, jumping all over the place and, like, trying to move, and it was a pain in the ass. But they wanted the wheelchair anyway. And I said, this isn't working. Like, Salcha doesn't like the wheelchair. And he's like, well, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, okay, fine. Like, I don't know what to do. They want me in this wheelchair, even though last time, I was fine. I did whatever. So they're pulling me in this wheelchair, and finally I'm like, I can't do this. So the guy's like, well, I can hold Salcha and push the chair. So I'm like, okay, that would be nice. So he took Salcha's leash and he held him on the right side. And Salcha walked fine. And so then we get to the elevator and he hands him to me. Then we get to the tram and he hands him to me. So whenever we were on like a tram or an elevator or something, he gave him to me. But when we were walking, he would hold Salcha's leash and he would walk Salcha. And so after all this effing around, all this mess, trying to find the chair, trying to get Salcha to walk, arguing with this guy, probably took us about 20, 25 minutes. I mean, it was ridiculous. Took forever. And so this guy was really nice, but he wasn't that experienced in all this. So we get like steps from the pet relief area and we stop for a minute. And he's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to take him in or do you want me to? And I was like, you can take him in if you want, but I can go in. And he's like, okay. So we're standing there for like 30 seconds deciding what to do, and all of a sudden, Salcha just pisses all over the floor. And I'm like, oh, shoot, now what am I going to do? He, like, barely made it. He was, like, right in front of the relief area. He almost made it. Last time he did make it, but that's because they got me on and off right away, and we went fast to the relief area. But, with all this dinking around, he had to go. And we just dinked around, and the second we stopped, he was like, ooh, I got to pee. So he went pee, and I was like, oh my God, what if they don't let us on the flight? Because, like, it says in the thing, like, you can get kicked out if your service animal urinates or defecates or whatever. So I'm like, oh, crap. And the guy's like, I wouldn't worry about it. There's no one around here. Well, this lady saw us, and so she gave us a pee pad, and so we put the pee pad on there to soak it up, and then I said, do we need to tell somebody? And the guy's like, there's no one to tell. Somebody will figure it out and tell somebody else. So he said to leave it. So we left it because he didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I was like, it's not my fault. I said, it's their fault. And he's like, yeah. I said, you know what? If he wouldn't have argued and he would have just helped me and they wouldn't have dealt with the wheelchair and all this other stuff, I would have been perfectly fine and we would have made it to the relief area. So I said, this is not his fault. This is not my fault. This is their fault. This is not my fault. And so we finally get food and we get there and he gives me Salcha back and he keeps me in the wheelchair. And so we're sitting there again and I'm ready to just be in tears. I'm like, oh, F this. I'm done. So again, they don't pre-board. They start calling group 1 and I'm like, oh, fudge. So I'm like, this is great. So somebody said they would go up and tell the lady that I needed help. So they went up and I was in the wheelchair and the lady goes, we don't have a passenger in the wheelchair. And so they came back and I said, well, I'm not supposed to be in a wheelchair. I have a guide dog, but they put me in a wheelchair because they thought it was easier. So they went back and told the lady that and she said, well, I'm not sure what's going on, but if she needs assistance, then she can come up here and get it. I'm busy. I'm not going out there. So I'm like, okay, this is effed. So these people guide me up to the counter and she's like, we'll have to get you some help to get onto the plane. And I'm like, okay. Well, I thought the flight attendants were just going to help me, but they had to stay there and check in guests or something. So I had to wait for an ambassador person to come to get me on the plane. So they load everybody. And then they put me on the plane. And I have to try to navigate through all these people on these really small seats with a guide dog and try to get through and get to my seat. And it was so hard. It was like a pain in the ass. And I kept telling people, like, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get through. I'm sorry. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe they don't pre-board. And so then the plane got off. And it sucks because you have to wait for everyone to get off the plane. So I wait for everyone to get off the plane at Epley. Everyone. And she's like, we have to call somebody to come get you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous because now my dad's right outside. And if I start walking, he'll say, Sarah. So I'm like, can I just go, please? So she's like, yeah. So she guides me out and I'm halfway up the aisle. And the help lady finally comes and she's like, oh, hi, I'll just walk with you. And I'm like, I don't need help anymore. And she's like, well, I'll walk with you to the entrance. So I get to the entrance, and my dad comes up, and he's like, Sarah. And I'm like, I'm good now, lady. And she's like, okay, thank you. And so, like, it was just insane. He's like, what were you doing? And I was like, oh, I was waiting for someone to come help me off the plane because they wouldn't let me off. And then finally I talked them into letting me off, and then whatever. And then my dad was worried about Salcha going pee, and he was super mad about Dallas. And I tried to tell him it wasn't my fault. And he's like, you need to prepare for this stuff, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And I was like, I couldn't. It wasn't my fault. And so then he ran like faster than anybody else, faster than the first people. I was out of breath. I couldn't breathe. I could barely keep up. I thought I was going to pass out. And he's like, you don't have a choice. You need to catch up. Salcha has to go now. He's more worried about Salcha than me or anybody else. Like, he's always worried about the dog more than me. Like, I put him in the kennel, and he's like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry. I'm sorry, dog. Because he doesn't want him to be locked up, even though that's his home. So then, like, an hour will go by, and he's like, I hope Salcha's okay. I'm like, we've been gone for an hour. And he's like, yeah, but the poor dog. Like, I don't know what it is. Him and my dogs, it's just like this. I think he feels like they're his pet children or something. I don't know what it is, but he's constantly, like, Salcha this, Salcha that. So, he did it with Chrome, too, and he did it with Pop. And he's just how he is. I don't know. My animals immediately attached to him, and then he's always like this. So we're running and running and running and running, and we finally make it there, and I'm like, God, I can't breathe. So I'm standing there trying to catch my breath, and he goes in and takes Salcha. And I'm just like, oh my God, we gotta walk slower now. I can't do this. So then we walk slower, and we go and get my suitcase, and the wheel's broken off. And I'm like, well, that's great. So I call my friend, and I'm like, hey, when we went to the airport, was my suitcase broken, or did it have 4 wheels? And he's like, no, it was fine. And I'm like, you didn't break it? And he's like, no. Why would you accuse me of that? I said, I'm not accusing you of that. I'm asking you if you did it. And he's like, no. So I'm like, well, somebody broke off my wheel, so they must have broke it while they were throwing my suitcases around. And I said, that's great, because I really like this suitcase, and now I'm going to have to buy another one. So I'm effed. Oh, God, I don't know what I'm doing for camp. Oh, fudge. I got to figure that out. Dang. Anyway, so I was like, well, this is great. Now I'm going to have to buy another suitcase. So I'm super annoyed, super mad, and I'm like, oh, my God. So I'm just like, oh, Lord, like, I don't even know at this point. So I'm like, well, somebody from the security people or the people that do the bags or whatever broke my wheel. So we're having a super hard time. My dad's trying to wheel my suitcase. It's really hard to wheel when there's a missing wheel. So we barely make it to the car. We finally make it to the car, and it's like my dad had the hardest time wheeling this dumb suitcase. And then we finally make it to the car, and then everything's good after that. So I was like done. I was ready to cry. Like, I forgot to tip the first guys, and my mom's like, did you tip them? And I said no. And she's like, dang it, Sarah. And then I was like, I wasn't even thinking about it. I had so much going on. And so I started bawling. And she's like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And I'm like, I feel really bad. They were so nice. And she's like, it's okay, it's okay. But I didn't know what to do with all these problems. Like, I was on the plane trying not to cry. My mom's like, it's okay, you made it. And I'm like, yeah, but this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And she's like, yeah, but the point is that you got home, and you made it safely. And you were able to get on the plane, and you were able to problem solve, and you were able to figure it out. But I was more upset about what happened. But she's like, the point isn't what happened. The point is that you got there, and you figured it out. All that stuff is like stuff. What matters is that you made it. And so I'm like, okay. And then I'm talking to my dad, and I thought he was going to be like, oh, well, this didn't go well, and blah, 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 and I don't know, because he's always, like, nervous for me to travel, so I thought he was going to be like, maybe you shouldn't go again, or I don't know what to do, or whatever. I didn't know what he was going to say. And so he says, well, that's stuff you're going to have to figure out. That's how it is. Sighted people have problems, too. And I'm like, not like that. And he's like, yeah, they do. They just don't talk about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, you either figure it out or you don't go anywhere ever again. And I'm like, well, I don't want to not go anywhere. I want to go see my friend in California. And he's like, well, then you're going to deal with that stuff, and you're going to keep dealing with that stuff, and you're just going to go. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't have a choice. And he's like, yeah, I guess not. You either deal with it and figure it out or you sit at home. And I'm like, okay, wow, like, WTF. So, okay, so yeah. So that was my airport experience that I finally had time to process. I would like to tell somebody what happened higher up because I don't want this to happen again. I don't know what you're supposed to do. I mean, the dog was on the plane for over an hour and a half, and of course he's going to need to pee. I didn't really feed him or water him that much at all before I left. I got up really early, and I gave him plenty of chances to pee. But a dog is a dog, and, you know, like, if he's walking, he's got to pee. You know, like, he can't walk for, like, 4 hours and not pee. You know, like, I mean, he did the best he could, but, you know, it was like by the time I got to the pee area, it had been like 40 minutes. Well, I mean, he had to go. We were off the plane. You know, he flew this whole time. He was probably wondering what was going on. I mean, I had to go, you know, so like, I don't know. I don't know what the best thing is to do because the pet relief areas are not close and you don't always get the best help. And then you get stuck like floating around like this, and then your pet has an accident and you don't know what to do, and you're nervous because they say in the thing you cannot have accidents in this airport, and you're like, well, I wouldn't have had an accident if it wasn't for all this. Like, we could have made it to the pet area if they hadn't done all this crap. You know, like, the first time I just walked and followed the people and they were fine. We made it to the relief area, no problem, and Salter went pee. It was perfectly fine. He went around the whole airport. But then these people were like, oh, wheelchair easier. Wheelchair be easier. And they just insisted on me having this wheelchair. And Salter didn't like it. And they were just like, oh, well, you figure out. Salter walk beside. And I'm like, he doesn't like this. He's not walking. I don't know what to do. And they're like, he'd be okay. I'm like, no, he's not okay. He won't walk. He won't listen to me. He doesn't want to do it. And they were like, yeah, but wheelchair easier. You need wheelchair. And so it just made me mad because the first time went so well. And then the second time was like, to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it was like horrible. Horrible. So like, I don't know how to prepare for some of these tips in the future. I don't know what to do. I hate DFW. It's the biggest pain in the ass ever. Like, I just don't know. So if any blindies are listening to this and you have any tips, please shout out because this was ridiculously insane. And it was stupid because I put on all my reservations that I needed assistance. Nobody was ever waiting there. I had to wait and stand by the plane until they called someone, and I had to wait for someone to come, and then they helped me, and all this stuff happened. So it was really frustrating because, you know, like if it says needs assistance, they should be there and ready to help you, but, you know, you have to wait. Like, everyone got off the plane, and I waited for like 5 minutes to get off the plane to go see my dad, and I would have been waiting longer if they hadn't let me go off. I mean, the assistant people didn't come right away. Even with the minors, they took them right away, and then it took another 5 minutes for the guy to get us two blind people, lead us onto a bench, and then we had to sit there and wait for the next guy, and then the guy and the girl went off, like, right away, no problem, and then I had all these issues. So it was, like, ridiculous. So I don't know what to do because I have to travel in the future, and I'm going to want to see my friend again. I want to go see my other friend in California. Like, I want to be able to do stuff, and so I just don't know. I'm still so frustrated because it was horrible, and I don't know how to mitigate it. I don't know how to prevent any of it. It was awful, and I don't understand what went wrong and why and how to prevent it. It was like hell. I'm sorry. So that was my airport experience. It was really frustrating. And I have to work less, which is a really long story. But since I'm going to be off more, my dad said in the spring he will show me around the dog park around my house, by my house. And then one day a week when I'm off, I can take Salcha to play and get his energy out and hang out for something to do. But we can't do that until spring because it's winter and it's freezing and it's snowy and we're not playing in the cold. But anyway, so that was my experience, and I just wanted to share it because I still can't stop thinking about it, and I'm still annoyed, and it's just frustrating to me, and I don't know. But anyways, I hope you guys are having a good night, and I will talk to all of you later. Bye, Dibs.
3 minutes, 1 second. Viewfinder, image, 3, stop recording, take picture, stop recording video.